It all started with a letter tucked into my mailbox, folded with surgical precision and sealed with a gold HOA sticker like they were delivering a royal decree. The envelope was cream-colored, embossed with the name of our homeowners association in curly script that made me instinctively distrust it. Inside, the message was short and sharp. Your decorative wall has been reported as visually aggressive. Please remove it within 14 days or face a formal citation. Visually aggressive. I stared at that phrase like it had insulted my mother. How can a wall be aggressive? It's 6 feet of stone masonry, adorned with creeping ivy and a modest plaque that reads, McAllister Boundary, 1864. The wall's been here longer than half the state. I didn't build it. I inherited it, quite literally, when I bought this house 5 years ago. The realtor had mentioned it in passing. Oh, and that stone wall out front? It's a registered historic landmark. You can't alter it, but it sure adds charm. Karen didn't think so. Now, before I go further, let me introduce the cast of our little suburban drama. Me? I'm Tom Gallagher, mid-40s, divorced software engineer, full-time introvert. My idea of confrontation is leaving a passive-aggressive post-it. I moved to Sycamore Hollow to escape noise, nonsense, and people who use phrases like synergy in daily conversation. Then there's Karen Dorsey, HOA president. 72 years of tightly wound fury packed into a 5-foot frame with orthopedic shoes and a Bluetooth headset that she never takes off, even in yoga class. She believes in order, symmetry, and the righteous power of laminated guidelines. If suburbia had an authoritarian regime, she'd be supreme leader. Karen has a particular gift for turning molehills into volcanoes. Last year, she fined a neighbor $75 for having a bird feeder too inviting to squirrels. She once initiated a vote to ban inflatable Santas because they create a chaotic winter narrative. But this time she'd picked the wrong fight. I didn't take the letter seriously at first. I assumed it was a mistake. Surely Karen wouldn't demand the removal of a landmark older than her HOA charter. But then came the visits. First it was a knock, then a lecture. Karen on my porch, clutching her clipboard like it held divine commandments. This wall, she began, pointing like she was revealing evidence at a trial, exudes a confrontational aesthetic. It disrupts the visual tranquility of the neighborhood. I blinked. It's a wall. It's been here since 1864. We've had several complaints. From who? Confederate ghosts. She didn't laugh. She never does. Instead, she whipped out a laminated citation. 14 days to remove or face legal escalation. Karen, I said slowly, trying to be diplomatic. That wall is a registered historic structure. It's protected by state and federal preservation codes. She scoffed. Our bylaws override ornamental decor clauses. This isn't lawn gnomes, Karen. It was built during the Civil War. Well, she sniffed. Perhaps it's time for a more modern look. I stared at her in disbelief. She stared back like she was trying to telepathically level the thing. And that was the moment I realized. This wasn't about a wall. This was about Karen asserting dominance over what she considered her kingdom. That night, I dug through the documents the realtor gave me. Sure enough, the wall was listed under the National Register of Historic Places, documented as the original boundary of the McAllister estate, constructed from quarried limestone in the early 1860s. Armed with legal precedent and stubborn resolve, I emailed Karen the documentation, complete with links to the preservation laws and scanned copies of my title and deed. Her reply? The HOA has decided to escalate this matter to the Architectural Compliance Committee, which was ironic because I later found out the committee was just her best friend Denise, and a guy named Craig who thinks TikTok is a type of mint. That's when things got strange. A week later, I woke up to find yellow caution tape across the wall. Not city tape, HOA tape, printed with their logo and the words, pending removal. Then came the paint. Someone, and I don't want to point fingers but it rhymes with Schmerin, spray painted a giant red X across the plaque. I reported it to the local preservation board. They were not pleased. Neither was I, because now it was personal. and Karen had no idea who she was messing with. Karen didn't take my email well. That much was obvious the next morning when I spotted her Prius idling across the street, half hidden behind a neighbor's rosebush like it was a stakeout and not just another Tuesday in suburbia. She wasn't alone. Denise sat in the passenger seat with binoculars, sipping what I could only assume was her third decaf chai of the morning. Craig stood on my neighbor's lawn holding a measuring tape like he was preparing for a forensic sweep. Together, they looked like a budget SWAT team on loan from the Hallmark Channel. I waved. They didn't wave back. The next escalation came in the form of a notice of mandatory mediation. It sounded like a parody, like something you'd get for refusing to make eye contact during couples yoga. But no. According to the HOA, I was now required to attend a conflict de-escalation session to discuss the architectural nonconformity and its emotional impact on the community. It was scheduled for 7 p.m. Thursday. Karen's house. Of course it was. Now, I'd rather have dental surgery with no anesthesia than sip herbal tea while being lectured on neighborhood aesthetics by a woman who thinks wind chimes are instruments of chaos. But I showed up, because unlike Karen, I believe in documentation. Her living room looked like the set of an off-Broadway show called Suburban Supremacy. Lace doilies, glass swans, and a giant oil painting of a sunset that somehow still managed to feel passive-aggressive. Denise offered me a gluten-free cookie. Craig handed me a name tag that said, Thomas Wall Owner. We sat. Karen started with a PowerPoint. Slide 1. Aggression in Architecture, Understanding Visual Conflict. Slide 2. Stone, Symbolism, and the Psychology of Confrontation. Slide 3. A zoomed-in photo of my wall with the caption, Emotional Disruption? I didn't say a word. Not yet. I just watched, eyes narrowing with each click of the remote, as Karen narrated the negative energy radiating from inorganic permanence. Finally, I held up a hand. Karen, I said, are you aware that the State Historical Preservation Office has already flagged your caution tape and graffiti as violations of federal statute? Silence. Then Craig coughed. Denise blinked. Karen smiled, but it was the kind of smile that only happens right before a volcano erupts. I don't respond to threats, she said. It's not a threat. It's a federal agency. There's a difference. She paused, then reached into a drawer and pulled out a new document. A revised citation, this time invoking HOA bylaw for point 7, subsection G, an incredibly vague clause about disruptive heritage artifacts causing emotional disharmony. Emotional disharmony. I scanned the page. You're weaponizing psychology now? It's called trauma-informed landscaping, she said. I stood up. This wasn't just war anymore. This was performance art with a vendetta. I walked out, calmly, drove straight to the Sycamore Hollow City Clerk's office. And within 24 hours, I had something better than an argument. A court-verified cease and desist order against the HOA for interfering with a registered landmark. I even got a formal letter from the State Preservation Society, stating unequivocally that any attempt to alter, remove, or label the McAllister Wall would result in legal and financial consequences of the highest degree. I forwarded the email to Karen with a cheerful subject line. Not today, dictator. That should have ended it. But then came the drone. Yes, a drone. Saturday morning, 6:14 a.m. I heard a faint buzzing. Looked out my window and saw it. A silver quadcopter hovering 6 feet above the wall, camera blinking red, slowly scanning the perimeter like a tiny surveillance satellite. It did 3 full loops before retreating back over the Dorsey residence. 2 hours later, a new HOA letter arrived. Attached were aerial photos of the wall, each labeled with comments like aggressively angular, potential moss intrusion, and my personal favorite, emotionally inconsistent with the community vibe. I laughed so hard I had to sit down. That night, I invited my cousin Liam over. He's a hobbyist drone pilot with a mischievous streak and a collection of custom skins that make his drones look like miniature fighter jets. We ran a recon mission of our own. By dawn, the HOA's drone had mysteriously lost GPS signal and crash-landed in Karen's koi pond. Accidents happen. But Karen? She was just getting started. Karen's drone was just the beginning. Like a tiny flying omen, it signaled the arrival of something far worse than citations or awkward porch confrontations. The HOA emergency meeting. I got the email at 2:13 a.m. Subject line: Urgent, wall review and neighborhood harmony hearing. First off, who schedules anything at 2 a.m.? Second, they set the meeting for 8 a.m. on a Saturday. A Saturday, the most sacred day for sweatpants and silence. The attached agenda was 9 pages long, but I only needed to read the title of Item 3B. Visually aggressive structure at Lot 12 action plan for removal. Spoiler: I'm Lot 12. I showed up anyway, because I wanted to see just how far they'd take this theater of the absurd. The meeting was held in the Sycamore Hollow Community Room, a converted pool house with bad lighting and folding chairs that creaked like they were holding grudges. Karen stood at the front, flanked by Denise, vice president, suspiciously quiet, and Craig, architectural committee, TikTok mint guy. They had a full projector setup, which I assume was borrowed from someone's child's middle school science fair. Slide 1, a close-up of my wall. Slide 2, the same wall, photoshopped with ominous shadows and digitally added barbed wire. I kid you not. Residents, Karen began, tapping her headset mic like she was doing stand-up at a cruise ship karaoke night. We are gathered today to address a threat to the aesthetic sanctity of our community. Somewhere behind me, someone actually gasped. She clicked to the next slide, a graph labeled Neighborhood Tension Since Wall Appearance. The red line spiked like a stock market crash. I could have sworn I saw Comic Sans on the y-axis. Karen turned to face the room. We've received 12 formal complaints about the McAllister wall. Words used include oppressive, grim, and stone-cold terror. A voice piped up from the back. Isn't it a Civil War-era monument? Karen didn't even blink. Exactly. War. Why bring that energy to our cul-de-sac? Another resident, Mr. Jensen, who once got fined for having a garden gnome with sunglasses, stood up and said, "It's history. You can't just erase it because it clashes with your mulch." There was a pause. Karen adjusted her glasses like she was about to sentence us all to 40 hours of HOA detention. This isn't about erasure. It's about community cohesion. Then she pointed at me. Mr. Gallagher has refused to remove the structure despite multiple citations and a direct appeal to common courtesy. All heads turned. I stood up, slow, my voice calm, even. Just so we're clear, I said, this wall is on the National Register of Historic Places. You are all violating federal preservation law by interfering with it. That spray paint, that tape, that drone footage, all part of an official complaint I filed with the State Preservation Board. I hope you like subpoenas. Silence. Denise dropped her pen. Craig whispered something about needing to check his phone. Karen? She squared her shoulders and said, well, the HOA has resources too. I almost laughed. What, a budget for more drones? No, she said. A vote. And that's when she dropped her trump card. Karen planned to push a neighborhood-wide referendum to classify the wall as a community threat, thereby giving the HOA emergency powers to intervene. That's right. She was trying to democracy her way into bulldozing 160-year-old limestone. She even had flyers printed. I know because one was duct-taped to my mailbox the next morning. It read, "Protect your peace. Remove the wall. Vote yes on HOA Amendment 14D, Obstruction Elimination Clause." They used a stock photo of a crying baby superimposed over my wall. I knew then that this wasn't just personal. This was war by paperwork. And I wasn't about to lose to a woman who thinks beige is a personality. After the HOA meeting circus, I figured Karen would take a breath. Maybe read a book, touch some grass, reflect on the Constitution. She didn't. Instead, I came home the next evening to find a soil analysis crew in my yard. 3 guys in polos, poking the ground with metal rods like they were hunting for oil. When I asked what they were doing, one of them glanced at a clipboard and muttered, "Environmental stress testing. HOA orders. Stress testing. The dirt." I called my lawyer. Yes, I now had a lawyer. His name was Curtis, he wore bow ties unironically, and he loved historic preservation law the way normal people love tacos. Curtis told me not to engage. Let them dig. If anything, he said, they're only strengthening your case. But the digging wasn't just metaphorical. Karen was clawing into history, and then she found something. 3 days later, I got a call from Curtis at 7 a.m. His voice was urgent, like someone who just accidentally opened an ancient tomb. You need to come down to the archives, he said. Now. The county archives were housed in a basement below City Hall that smelled like paper and regret. Curtis met me at the entrance with a folder thick enough to give a paper cut from 3 feet away. I pulled some documents related to the McAllister estate, he said. You're not going to believe this. Inside were scanned letters, blueprints, and a deed transfer dating back to 1868. Turns out the wall wasn't just decorative or even just a boundary. It marked the original entry point to an underground shelter. Not a storm shelter, a refuge route, built by abolitionists. This wall, Curtis said, tapping a faded map with a yellowed fingertip, was part of a covert stop along the Underground Railroad. My blood ran cold, and just like that, everything changed. This wasn't a battle over taste. It was a battle over legacy. Karen was trying to demolish a piece of American history because it clashed with her begonias. The next morning, I called the local historical society, then the state, then a journalist friend of mine from college who now worked at a national magazine. And then I went nuclear. I published the full story online. Photos, documents, a time-lapse of Karen's drone stalking my house set to dramatic cello music. I included a clip of the meeting where she referred to Civil War structures as visual clutter. The headline? HOA tries to bulldoze Underground Railroad landmark over vibes. It went viral. Within 48 hours, my inbox was on fire. I got interview requests, offers to donate to legal fees. A retired archaeologist from Vermont emailed me a 3D scan of similar walls used during the era. But the real kicker? Someone from the National Park Service called. They'd seen the article. They wanted to verify the documents, inspect the property, and, if validated, grant the wall federal heritage protection. Which meant not only could Karen not tear it down, she'd likely have to issue a public apology for defacing it. But Karen? She wasn't done. Not by a long shot. That same day, I received a hand-delivered letter. An HOA-issued summons. According to them, I had violated Clause 7.9, obstruction of community harmony, and was required to appear at a residential arbitration tribunal. The kicker? The tribunal was being held in Karen's sunroom. And the judge? Denise. I laughed so hard I nearly dropped the letter. But Curtis didn't laugh. She's trying to manufacture a record of noncompliance, he said. They're going to use it to justify emergency intervention. You know what that means, right? I nodded. Bulldozer time. And I had 72 hours to stop it. The morning of the tribunal. I put on my best collared shirt, not out of respect, but out of strategy. Karen expected defiance. I gave her polite contempt. Curtis told me to keep it civil, but film everything. So I strapped on a body cam, the same model my cousin uses to record mountain biking, and walked across the street to the Beige Lion's den. Karen's house smelled like artificial lemons and judgment. The tribunal, if you can even call it that, was a folding table surrounded by mismatched chairs and 3 pitchers of cucumber water. Denise sat in the center seat like she'd been sworn in by Judge Judy herself. Craig manned a camcorder with duct tape on the side. Karen opened with, "Today's purpose is to evaluate the extent to which the subject's stone structure is harming community cohesion." I smiled. Can we define cohesion? Or are we going by how tightly you can cling to a personal grudge? Curtis elbowed me. Karen cleared her throat and presented the committee with new evidence. This included a printed screenshot of my viral post with the caption disrespectful to HOA authority, a quote from a neighbor who said the wall made their schnauzer tense, a hand-drawn sketch Craig made of a better wall design, which, for the record, looked like a decorative fence from a dollar store. Then came her closing argument. I'll give her credit, she had flair. In these uncertain times, she said, voice quivering for effect. We must ask ourselves, does a monument to the past justify discomfort in the present? Or should we look forward, to harmony, to symmetry, to mulch? She was really going to end it on mulch. That's when I pressed play on my bodycam recording and flipped the projector Curtis brought. Let me show you what discomfort looks like, I said. Slide 1. HOA caution tape around a federal landmark. Slide 2. A spray-painted red X over a registered plaque. Slide 3. Karen's drone footage, recorded from her own iPad, which she'd accidentally left connected to her home cloud. The room went still. Then I dropped the hammer. A live Zoom call with a representative from the National Park Service. Karen stammered. That's not admissible. This is a private meeting. The Park Service rep, a man named Joel with a ranger hat and a terrifyingly calm voice, replied, Actually, this is now a matter of federal jurisdiction, and if you don't vacate that removal order, you'll be facing a legal injunction, not just a complaint. Curtis beamed like a proud dad at graduation. Karen froze. Denise dropped her pen again. Craig muttered something about needing to update his TikTok. The meeting ended not with a bang, but with the quiet shuffle of Karen retreating to her kitchen and Denise awkwardly offering me a scone. 2 days later, I received formal notice. The HOA has rescinded all citations related to the McAllister Wall, effective immediately. But it wasn't over, because a week later the story hit national news. Homeowner saves Underground Railroad landmark from HOA bulldozer. NBC, CNN, even NPR, who called it a powerful lesson in the quiet heroism of historic preservation. I did 1 podcast. Curtis did 3. Karen went uncharacteristically silent until she resigned. The official reason? Health and personal priorities. The unofficial reason? Probably the 6,000 angry emails, the local protest in front of her house, or the documentary pitch I got from a production company titled The Wall, a Suburban Rebellion. Now the wall's being restored. With grant money. The ivy's been carefully trimmed, the plaque cleaned and remounted. We're adding a small historical marker and a QR code linking to the original archive documents. School kids will come visit. Tourists, maybe. And as for Karen, she still lives across the street. But she doesn't speak to me, just waters her hedges with military precision, occasionally glaring over the top. Sometimes I wave. She never waves back. But the wall still stands. And now, so do I.